I never thought I'd end up on a thumbnail of Inspiring Philosophy's literal video.
But you don't want to tell your audience why you were featured in that stream, do ya? It's because you couldn't read the text right in front of you when you tried to argue there's a contradiction in the Bible.
Let's start with John 20. We have Mary Magdalene. She's alone and she walks into the tomb.
He says, John reports, Mary was alone. Now, I don't know about you, but I did notice there is a verse right in front of us on screen where Mary said, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb and we don't know where they have put him. Does John say Mary was alone?
No, I think this is a case where he is using what you referred to earlier as literary spotlighting.
So let's go over Inspiring Philosophy's answer for the contradictions in the Bible. For objection, there's nothing wrong with having different perspectives or, for example, omitting certain things, but these events are contradictory and could not all have happened.
Only if you ignore the writing techniques of ancient authors. When we employ these literary devices, the supposed contradictions of the resurrection narrative dissolve, which we'll get into.
Lycona notes ancient authors utilized a number of liberties when writing ancient historical texts.
So this guy that he's talking about, Lycona, is a Christian apologist, which obviously he's going to go write in his book trying to defend that, as well as he went and studied at a Christian university, so clear bias here.
So this is nothing more than poisoning the well. The very article he is citing, which he also didn't read, says that Lycona has a PhD in New Testament studies. So Lycona is a bona fide New Testament scholar. But if we can just dismiss someone because they're biased, the next time this Muslim creator tries to argue for Islam, be sure to use his own tactic against him. Just dismiss everything he says because he's clearly biased in favor of Islam.
Some of these devices are transferal, when an author knowingly attributes words or deeds to a person that actually belong to another person.
So basically, that's just a straight up lie. Literary devices, that's a lie. Basically, if Jack went to the bathroom, he can say, actually, John went to the bathroom and Jack was eating cereal.
So this creator demonstrates he is just uninformed on the literature surrounding literary devices in ancient biographies. One cannot use one to straight up lie, as Mike Lycona said. Such adapting was not intended to distort the truth, but to communicate it more effectively. Modern itinerant speakers, teachers, preachers, and even professors often do this in their lectures, in homilies, for emphasis, or to make a point more clearly. In fact, most of us have done it for similar reasons when telling a personal story. If your grandma says that she got her test results from the doctor, but fails to mention that it was the nurse who read her the test results, she didn't lie to you. She used a literary device to simplify the story. The doctor is still the source of the test results, even though they were read through the nurse. One cannot use the literary device of transferal to lie. You could transfer the words of someone to someone else if they were of the same group. We can see an example of this in the Gospels. Luke tells us elders came to Jesus on behalf of a centurion, but Matthew has simplified the account and just says the centurion asked Jesus. Matthew isn't lying. He just transferred the words from the elders to the centurion to simplify the account, since he is really the one who is asking Jesus for a miracle. This is an appropriate way to use the device of transferal without lying. And this same reasoning applies to the other literary devices this creator takes issues with. Ancient authors were not free to use them to invent stories whole cloth. They could use them to improve the narrative flow, but could only use them within the range of telling truth the way the average person tells a story.
Unlike what he tries to push, most serious ancient authors did not have this level of delusion in their stories or this level of change.
So once again, this creator demonstrates he is just unaware of the scholarly literature around this topic. Ancient authors like Plutarch, Suetonius, or Diodorus used literary devices, and it wasn't delusional to do so. They weren't creating drastic changes like he is implying. In fact, numerous scholars have noted that the Gospel authors use literary devices far less than the average biographer of that time would, and they followed their sources far more strictly than other biographers did. Matthew and Luke, for example, had more reverence for Mark than Josephus even had for the Old Testament.
But even if they did, this is supposed to be the words of God we're talking about, divinely inspired by God. You're arguing God divinely inspired people to lie.
No, we're not. You just redefine what lying is so you can make that claim. This is perfectly within the normal range the average person tells a story, and within the range the ancient author would write a biography.
So there's so many contradictions between the four, but I'm going to focus on two to make this very obvious. This is two contradictions out of a bunch, right? Mary goes to the tomb. She sees that Jesus is gone. She doesn't know where they put his body, so she runs to Peter and she tells them. And then Peter and the other guy, they run to the tomb. They go and they look and they just were wondering where his body was. So they didn't understand from the scriptures that he rose. And then they leave Mary alone. Mary is crying. And then the angels, 2 angels come to her. And then they tell her, why are you crying? She says they have taken Jesus' body away. And then she turns around and sees Jesus standing there. But she did not know it was Jesus. And then Jesus talks to her. She gets really excited. He says, don't touch me, for I have not yet ascended. Now, if you go to the second story, Mary is going with a bunch of women, right? And the argument is that they didn't mention the other woman in the story. Fine, right? As they go there, they didn't find Jesus' body. The angels immediately appear to them.
An important aspect you're missing, though, is that Luke says they appeared as men. Keep that in mind.
They go and the angel talks to them, tells them Jesus is risen. They run back to the men, and Mary, along with all the women, they tell Peter that everything that has happened, including the fact that Jesus rose up, including the fact of all these things. And then all these men, Peter runs there and runs to the tomb to check everything out. Now, if she already seen the angels and then she ran to the tomb, ran to the men and told them, after the men left, she would not be crying, saying that they took my body, Jesus, and crying to these angels when the angels already told her that she rose to the dead and you're not going to find them there.
But you're assuming Mary believed everything she heard from the angels, who were just appearing as men. Luke just says the women went back and reported everything they'd seen and heard. It appears the disciples didn't believe anything they said about the body being missing, except for Peter and John, who went to investigate. And John in his Gospels merely left out the initial appearance of the angels appearing as men to the women. It's perfectly reasonable, especially given what John says, that Mary didn't believe the initial report, because to her she just saw 2 men claiming Jesus had risen without evidence. She probably didn't believe until Jesus appeared to her and the other women later on.
Also, the other gospel says he is not here.
Yeah, read the context. They're referring to inside the tomb. That's why they say, why do you seek the living among the dead? Because the dead are in tombs.
See, this doesn't work because the angel is sitting on the rock tells them that don't be afraid, come see where they lay. But here, after they go inside, they see a man, and the man says the exact same thing. Why would they have to repeat the exact same statement?
Because as Lycona and myself already pointed out in the very stream you're responding to, Matthew has simplified and compressed the account. The angel wasn't still sitting on the rock when the women arrived. He moved inside the tomb before they showed up.
He also tries to imply that this event happened before the woman came, but for it to be narrated, for them to have seen the earthquake, they had to have been there.
Matthew doesn't say the women saw that. A simpler explanation is after his resurrection, Jesus just told his disciples what occurred that morning.
But aspiring philosophy, the dishonest person that he is only plays 1 second of my video to his biblical scholar and does not show the rest of it because, he can't answer it.
But anyone can go watch that stream and see we did respond to your other arguments. We just didn't play the rest of your video because you were hard to hear. So we played a video by Dan Barker making similar arguments. And if you want to call other people dishonest, you should first start representing the sources you cite accurately.